And the last thing we want is when every time a child shares certain things, and there's always a very quick judgment on the part of the adults, right, on the material that was being shared.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a podcast channel where we share tips and resources on Catholic parenting. Presented through the lens of the theology of the body, we will see how we can gift our children in ways that will help them find true happiness and flourish in accordance with God's wonderful plan for each and every one of them. My name is John Hui and I'm your host for this series. We started off our discussion on this topic by discussing what gender theory is, and then we went on to discuss how gender theory came about through the years and centuries. And in the last episode, we discussed the medical evidence for, or rather that was lacking, to support the case for gender transitioning care or gender affirming care. In this episode, we are going to discuss how we can journey with those who experience gender dysphoria, and oftentimes in a very painful way. So we are very happy to have with us Mr. Nicholas Gabriel Lim. All right, Nicholas, of course, a good friend of ours. He's the co-founder and board chair of Indigo and Company, a charity specializing in human sexuality, providing supports for individuals and families navigating sexuality issues through mental health therapy, befriending, and life coaching. Nicholas is a registered psychologist and a recognized expert in Singapore specializing in youth work. Notably, Nicholas holds a Juris Doctor degree, making him a very unique mental health and legal practitioner all in one package. So this is very complicating and sometimes very delicate and very sensitive topic that we are going to discuss, and we really couldn't think of many others more appropriate for this little interview. And but I guess as we begin, we do know that for a number of parents, more of them seem to be getting rather concerned about this topic. Recently, when we've been giving talks to parents, we've been getting almost invariably at every talk questions on gender theory and how to approach this topic, or really answer the questions that their own children bring up. Questions which we ourselves did not really experience or think about as young parents in the past. Yes. So now, but this is a reality, it's coming on, and I think we do need to help our parents be equipped for this journey, because challenges are always new and ever changing. Yes. So before we go on to the rest of the podcast, I think it will be important for us to really clarify certain terms, because there are a lot of terms which are used interchangeably and sometimes even very loosely, and we find ourselves talking over each other's head and not really getting to a point of meeting and not really understanding each other well because of the lack of clarity in this area. So maybe we could define certain of these terms before we continue with the rest of the discussion. Terms like, what's gender dysphoria in the first place? What's being transsexual, or when your child says that she's trans, what does that mean? And there's this term called the rapid onset gender dysphoria that some psychologists have described recently. Would you like to perhaps enlighten us on some of these terms?
Sure. So thanks again for inviting me. I think this is an opportunity for me to share my work, and like you rightly pointed out, it's something that we need to talk about as openly as we can, have dialogue, and to listen to each other. Alright, so with all these terminologies, I think the one thing that is quite clinical would be that of gender dysphoria. It's not something that we concocted or cultural for that matter. It's actually in this book called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, edition 5. Right, so without misquoting it, I'll just refer to the DSM-5 to basically help us understand what the gender dysphoria is about. Okay, so gender dysphoria is actually a psychological distress that results from an incongruence between one's sex assigned at birth and one's gender identity. So something to take note here, let's break it down a little bit. The sex assigned at birth is basically usually based on the external genitalia. Right? The gender identity is a psychological sense of one's gender. right? And the incongruence is understood as when there's a subjective evaluation of one's gender where it's at odds with the sex assigned at birth. Yeah. So typically, as mental health practitioners, I'm talking about the likes of psychiatrists and psychologists. When we make a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, we typically refer to the DSM, and and not like we can diagnose anyhow. There's certain criteria we need to follow, and for children, there's actually a 8 items, that we have to look at, right? And the condition for children have to be such where there is the psychological distress, the feeling of incongruence is experienced at least 6 months period. And out of these 8 items, there are actually 6 items, out of which one of them actually is quite dominant in their experience of the dysphoria or the incongruence. And also, it needs to be connected with some clinical conditions like social disorder and stuff like that. Okay, so that's for children. But for adolescents and adults, it's lesser. It's instead of 8 items, actually 6 items. And similarly, the feeling of distress needs to be experienced within the period at least 6 months, and the manifestation of any of these 6 items has to be 2 out of the 6, right? And similarly, in addition to this, there needs to be other clinical experience, right? For example, like social disorder. So it's not so easy to be diagnosed as with gender dysphoria. All right. So key thing here is the psychological distress and the incongruence, right? Yeah.
You're right.
So the transsexual is basically understood as somebody who have gone through a surgical procedure to change one's gender. From one to the other. So I was born male with male genitalia, and I've undergone surgical procedure to change that to a female genitalia. Then I'll be considered a transsexual.
Right.
Yeah, so I would have gone through a procedure. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So what about those who are so-called transgender? I think we do have a lot of them who may not have gone through transitioning, whether medical or surgical. How would we define transgender?
So they identify as the opposite sex. So if I was assigned at birth as a male, but I really feel that I'm more female in many aspects. Could be from the way my outlook, the way not just my outlook of my worldview, but also myself, and how I connect very much so with the female traits, right? And vice versa for the opposite gender. So I could be born female, but I identify more with male.
I see. And identification more with the opposite sex rather than one's own biological sex.
That's right. And I think very loosely, those what we define as transsexual, those who have gone through the procedure also consider themselves transgender nowadays. It's quite loose.
Yes, that's right.
So. As with all things, we don't want to quickly label anybody, right? But I guess for the purposes of our discussion, so that we can discuss a little bit more, we just understand for the purposes of our discussion, transsexual are those who actually gone through surgical procedure. Transgender may not. That's for the purposes of our discussion. But I think out there, socially, is quite loose.
Very loose.
And some may not even feel comfortable with the word transgender or transsexual if they already transited surgically. And they identify more as transgender, and some may take offense. So we just want to be sensitive to all these kind of labels and use of labels, so to speak.
Right. So it's important to understand the sensitivities involved, and to understand that unfortunately out there a lot of these terms are used interchangeably and very loosely.
Very much so.
And it can actually be different from what one interprets. It could be quite different from how another person interprets it sometimes.
That's right.
So that could be a challenge here. Yes. Okay. Besides transgender or transsexual, but like we said, these are terms that are so loosely used. We hear quite often nowadays some of the individuals saying that they are non-binary or asexual. According to even Facebook, there are at least 72 apparently genders or something like that, right? Some websites would say 107, and it might be changing all the time depending on the definitions that they use. So it seems like there's no end almost to the terms that are used, but these are the more common ones that seem to be bandied about nowadays, so asexual, non-binary. Perhaps for the benefit of our parents, it might be useful for us to elaborate on this term. So, non-binary, what does it mean?
This basically non-binary. Binary means either one or the other, right? So male or female. So non-binary means you don't identify with any of them. And then like you rightly pointed out, there are many, like almost now more than 100. I was wanted to tell you, it's no more 70, or it's more than 100 now, right? Yeah, more than 100 ways, of describing myself.
Yes.
More than a male or more than a female or both.
Yes.
Yes. So yes, non-binary.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, there's some of those who identify the idea of being bisexual. Basically means that they are attracted to both male and female in a very sexualized way, right? But if they say no, then they can be asexual. Totally, that's not sexually attracted to any, male or female. Yeah.
Right. And nowadays, there's also a term that is used by a number of psychologists and psychiatrists termed rapid onset gender dysphoria. Would you like to enlighten us on that term?
Yeah, you're right, because recently this is just like popping up, right? So essentially what it means is that prior to them entering teenage years, adolescent period, there's nothing, nobody could suspect there was any form of like dysphoria or difficulty in appreciating their own assigned gender, right? But once they move into this new phase of their life, and suddenly there's this almost adverse experience, of them not being able to connect with their assigned gender, right? And then I was telling you the psychological distress rapidly increases, for a variety of reasons. You could be triggered by, say, peer pressure. You could be triggered by social media. You could be triggered by judgment or comments from other people, that kind of thing. And suddenly it's really suddenly it becomes something that matters so much to them that they sometimes pursue very deeply their interest in this area, and then they obtain information from everywhere. And the literature does point out also to this. They call it the autism explosion of sorts, where those who are on the spectrum are more susceptible to this, because if they begin to be introduced to this possibility that it has to do with their sexuality, which is opposing to their assigned sex or gender, then they want to find, and then because of their condition, they pursue it very deeply, and it takes them down a rabbit hole where whatever opposing or alternative suggestion or knowledge even for their further consideration becomes very difficult for them. And they sometimes very hard to come out, and then they explore many other things, like for example taking supplements, hormone supplements, cross-dressing, not that they are wrong, but for someone with the condition it becomes obsessive, and even sometimes extensive, too much. Yeah, because if you compare that to a normal developing young individual, there's a little bit of moderation, right? As with all the other things, if you're interested in, like, say, gaming, or interested in something else, right? Then I will go all out to research about that area of interest, but there's also that openness to considering other things. Even if it means something that is disagreeing to your view, but you will still take in and you consider. But some of the condition may not. So I guess the cases that are highlighted, like even my case, myself for example, a lot of them who comes to see me with diagnosed gender dysphoria, almost like maybe 2 or 3 out of the 10 cases that I will see likely would have the ASD condition.
That is very high. That's definitely more than what we see in the general population. I think recent studies indicated that we have about 1% of the population would have some form of ASD. So it seems that with their condition that they have, they are more vulnerable to perhaps such influences, let's say, like you mentioned, from social media and from what they take in from friends and others as well.
Vulnerable to the extent where any well-meaning information that's being offered, not to the detriment of their own well-being, right, would likely not be considered. In that sense, susceptible. But otherwise, the information should be just neutral, just information. But because of the condition, they tend to unknowingly, very naturally,
Go down the rabbit
go
hole.
down, the pathway where it becomes absolute for them, and any other possible, even positive consideration for the pursuit of a different gender, right, would be considered as, I guess, opposing, right, to them, which is not to be the case, lah.
And you did mention something about the social media as one of the possible, of course it's not the only, but one of the possible associated factors, right? Would you like to share with us how social media can actually influence the young ones to go along that path and experience such dysphoria?
One of the psychology theories that we learn, right, is this theory by Erik Erikson. And according to his theory, all of us go through a certain developmental stage, right? And he identifies one stage called the identity phase of their life. So if we are given the opportunity to know who we are and learn who we are, then we have some fidelity to the understanding of who we are, including that of our own gender. And that includes everything else. So if I was like a student or a son, if I understand what that means and how what's my place in my household, if I was a son, if I was a brother, my sister, or my siblings, what does that mean? So if there is a clear understanding of what my identity is, given the different context of where you go, then there is fidelity and commitment to that. But if this phase is not well developed, then according to Erik Erikson, you enter a phase of role confusion. You are conflicted. Right, so when a young person goes through puberty and they're at that stage of their life, right, and if they are not supervised and they are getting information from everywhere, but because they are learning to find out who they are, they want to find out who they are very curious of who they are, right, given their physiology as well, then if information was provided, obtained in a way that connects very much so with them in their felt experience, then they say, this is me, or this is rightly described of what I'm thinking about, or this is what I experience, that kind of thing. Then they will obviously and naturally, sensibly also connect to it and subscribe to those descriptions, or explanations, right? And with regards to this whole sexuality topic, right, it's so prevalent, it's out there in social media, everybody's talking about it, a lot of people are advocating about it. The lobbyist group, the activist group, for example. And you start searching about those things, right? Naturally, the social media also has the algorithm to continue to feed you in these kind of things. And there's no telling whether the information was appropriate, not appropriate, whether it's... when I say appropriate means like whether, if I was a child, whether the adult information that was offered in that kind of video or material is appropriate for me as, like, say, maybe a 12-year-old. Then it would be quite inappropriate. Because developmentally you are probably not ready and you want to find out a little bit more about who you are first in the context of your friends, in the context of your social, environment. Right? Those are more important developmentally speaking, according to Erik Erikson. Right? So in that sense, the social media, this technology may not be so helpful, especially in the absence of supervision.
So nothing beats human relationships still, in a sense, when these are optimal for a child's development.
I would say so.
The child has access to that.
Yeah, I would say so. And some hand-holding, some guidance,
And I remember the last time we did a podcast, you did mention very clearly about this thing about the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex.
That's right.
So maybe for the benefit of our listeners who might not have the opportunity to listen to that earlier podcast, we'd like to share a little bit on this thing about the limbic system and when and the prefrontal cortex and when a child, in a sense, becomes able to rationalize better as they grow older.
Sure. Yeah. So in addition to the Erik Erikson's theory, this is also I call it the neuroscience or brain science that informs my practice, right? So I subscribe to brain science because it's quite evidence-based. So you look at brain scans and brain image, right? I can put an adult beside a child and subject them to a emotional trigger, like say something fearful, like a tiger or sorts, that kind of thing, right? The brain scan shows that for the adult, right, two general part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is here, and the limbic system is the middle of the brain, actually lights up. but for the young person, only the limbic system lights up. All right, and basically what this whole limbic system is about is basically this part of the brain that's responsible for helping us make sense, of memories, meaning making, regulation of our hormones, the fight or flight response. So in short, it's basically the seat of emotions. All right, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive thinking, thinking of the consequences, decision making. Right. So brain science informs us that the limbic system is fully developed at the onset of puberty, right? So they quote unquote think a lot through the limbic system, right? But it's not until about mid-20s that the prefrontal is fully developed, right? That doesn't mean that the child cannot make decisions and cannot think of consequences. They can. It's developing, right? So it's the role of the adults to help them utilize their prefrontal and make connections from the limbic to the prefrontal as frequently as possible. So an example of all this is this. So if I was sexually attracted to somebody, right, that's likely coming from the limbic because it's a seat of emotions, right? So emotions are raging, the hormones are also at the onset of puberty, everything is coming in. So in the sense that I'm trying to make sense of what the whole experience is. But the prefrontal is not fully developed to a point where I need to ask I'm able to naturally ask myself, hey, what's all this about? That kind of thing. The adult need to come in to help facilitate the consideration. Like for example, say, what makes you like this person? What about him or her? And you are a boy, and then the other person is a boy. What is it about this other boy that you feel that you're attracted to this, attracted to? And have those discussions so that the prefrontal is now responsible for making those considerations. But if you don't do that, then the limbic will think, I feel so strongly, this feels really right, and I just want to pursue it, even at the expense of the dignity of the other person, or even my own personal dignity, right? But I don't think very much of that because I just feel right, And sometimes older teenagers, in their late adolescence, sometimes do things that will compromise the dignity of the other person, without the other person's consent, and then after that, also subject themselves to a bit of danger. So if they were to be exposed to adults who are not well-meaning, but maybe self-interest, and because you are at that stage, you're limbic first, you're considering limbic first, and because you feel so right about it, right, you may not know what this adult may do to you, although you're still a minor, considered minor. So the adult, like the caregiver or the parent, should, be involved in this kind of considerations, this kind of discussion, so that you help them sense make of what their whole experience is about, which can be very highly emotionally charged. Yeah,
that's right. And we need to communicate with them at that level that they are able to identify with, and then slowly, gradually help them make connections to the rational part, which is the prefrontal.
Yeah, right. And because there's a gap, right, of like the onset of puberty is about 15 or maybe younger, then the fully developed prefrontal is about mid-20s, late 20s. So there's like a 10-year window. So this kind of conversation, this kind of lived experience on a day-to-day basis, right, it can be very real and very intrusive, right, for a young person. It's very real for them. So in this gap of 10 years, you want to pace yourself in helping them to journey through life in a way that they know that you are supporting them, they feel understood, they feel appreciated, despite the fact that their behaviors may be compromising and detriment to their own well-being, even sexual development, right? How best can you still support them along the way and help them sense make at their level so that they can develop positively and they don't further compromise their own personal development, sexually or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. So it appears that there's no substitute in a sense for a responsible adult, of course in this case probably parents, to have a good relationship with the child and really affirm the child's goodness and importance by just being available to the child, especially when the child needs someone around, and being able to communicate and spending good quality time, and not just quality time but good quantity time, so that they can actually have enough opportunities for good quality interactions.
And I think the quality is about the child feeling that they are understood.
Yes.
Right? You can spend quantity, but if the child still don't feel that they are being understood by you, then what's the point? Then even the quality as well. So sometimes even with the 5 minutes that you have, maybe a car ride back from school to somewhere, or even that quality time, and if there's certain conversation or even no conversation but this presence, for example, and the child feel that there's total presence, and I could feel you, you could feel me, that kind of thing, right? And this understanding, it's very valuable. That's also quality.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want is when every time a child shares certain things, and there's always a very quick judgment on the part of the adults, right, on the material that was being shared, and that over time can quickly the non-verbals inform the child, and the child learns at the same time that I think you're very quick in labeling what I have to share, and after a while even on my character, and sometimes even I share something or even I request certain things, you're not even hearing me, I rather don't say anymore already, because
shut up.
I'll rather shut up. So the last thing we want is like that.
Yes.
And it's a 10-year window, can you imagine? So if we are not careful, I got to qualify that, because you don't want to always be careful, right? Because life is like,
yes,
you just want to be attuned and empathetic, to any offering of sharing, and just tune in. And don't be too worried about walking on eggshells, like I don't know what to do, everything must think of like, the right thing to say or right thing to do. No, that's not the point. But the point here is really to be attentive.
Just be there for the child, and address the child's needs at that point in time.
Yeah.
Right.
And mindful of the fact that we are adults, now that I share the prefrontal thing, right, that we are always prefrontal first. So, and they are always limbic first.
Yes.
So now that I can share this, in all these years of parenting, workshop, everything else, once I share this information, the adult will find it easy to switch code.
Yes.
If I was engaging a child, I can say, hey, wait, Nick, I don't want to say this kind of prefrontal, comments or think in this manner first. Let me just pause that for a while, park that consideration for a while. Don't offer that information that I've just thought prefrontally. Let me get down to my limbic first. I'll get into my limbic space. Let me engage my child in the limbic way first.
Right.
And then to my child limbic way first. And once my child is ready to consider the prefrontal consideration, then I offer the information.
Right.
Having said that, this is to say also that not that the child cannot consider prefrontal information, they can. It's developing, right? So we need to help them slowly mature that part of the brain. So we need to make sure that they are attended to first at the limbic space, then get them into the prefrontal by getting them to consider things like, why do you feel so angry? Why do you feel so upset? I feel so upset because. And when they start talking like that, they're entering the prefrontal already.
Right.
And if I further ask, okay, so if you're upset next time, then what will you do differently this time? A question like that will mean that the prefrontal is actually now thinking of a solution. Right? And if you can enter that space more and more with them, then you are helping them develop this, and then over time they will mature. The prefrontal will mature.
Yes. So it does sound like we do have to, as parents, make that conscious effort to allow these interactions to be available, and by being there with them, for them, and really listening to them with our hearts as well, right? Yeah, well, that's great. While we're at this, and early on we had also discussed this thing about autism and so on, what are the other possible causes or associated factors with gender dysphoria?
Loosely put, I would say certain trauma experience.
Adverse childhood experiences?
May or may not. That's why I say that's why I say loose. Yes, correct. Yeah. So when I talk about, I say loosely, it really covers the whole spectrum of trauma. So it's like in the strict sense, the word trauma, like physical abuse, violence involved, neglect, right? Sexual abuse, right? So these are the real sense on one end of the spectrum. If you go further up, the trauma could be a sense of like I was being misjudged or bullied, but not physically, but maybe verbally, and to a point where I now have maybe in my system, emotionally, in my heart or my mind, that experience of like I'm not as good enough, or I'm not so worthy, and that's very real for me. And I may never measure up as to be the boy that I was meant to be, because I was self-worth. But in the context of sexuality, for example, I'll never be good enough as the man of the house, or the boy who's supposed to be responsible, looking out for my siblings, or be the favorite of my grandfather or my father, for example. Those kind of things. But the lived experience is that of being significantly judged. Right? The kind of trauma, the kind of experience also considered trauma. Right? Or something in a religious setting, for example, say if I did anything wrong, right, and I'm punished, for example, by kneeling down from the altar. I might say like 10,000 did rosaries, that kind of thing, right? Trauma.
My goodness. Yeah, that would be traumatic for me, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, those kind also are considered trauma, right? So from the brain science point of view, at a subcortical level, this becomes stuck in memory. The lived experience becomes almost like, quote unquote, stuck in memory, and that kind of like informs, it guides, my behavior in many things. Right. So what I mean by that is, like, for example, if I was very scared to make any mistake, and it's always about my religion, I have to always kneel down in front of my altar, for example, right? Then church may not be something that I want to go. I don't believe in the God.
Yeah, you associate it with something negative.
Correct. Yeah. Right. So the this psychology, right? So the association. So those are trauma. So so loosely put, all these kind of things may influence, right, the consideration of the kind of person he or she may be, or should be.
As he or she searches for identity
in
order to find some meaning in himself or herself.
Yes, and it may not be their sexual identity.
Yes.
It may be their overall identity, but sexuality is just one aspect of a person's identity. So we just need to be appreciative of this reality of a person growing up, especially at that stage of their life, according to Erickson, right, where the identity really covers many things. From your role in terms of what you study, your career, to your order of birth, to your place, to your gender, male or female, how you contribute to your family or to society, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So because of what we're talking about, then in the context of sexuality, sometimes it can, I guess, spill over or trickle over to the part about me being a boy, or I shouldn't be a boy, I'm more like a female. Why? Because of whatever reasons. And then and in sessions like I have with my clients, for example, we explore aspects of like what make you feel that you are more female, like you are a boy, or because I'm a bit more soft, I'm a bit more reserved, and I think that's those are more feminine traits, therefore I'm a female. Then I'll say, what makes you think so? Yeah, given that you're more reserved, you're more soft-spoken, that kind of thing, right? What makes you feel that this is not also a male trait, but only a female trait, and therefore you identify more as a female as opposed to a male? Those kind of conversations.
Yeah, right. It seems that a lot of these will also be based on so-called stereotypes
Maybe.
of what we think is a male and what we think is a female, when actually males can have individuals with so many different kinds of personalities and characteristics, and so too with females, right?
But I mean, I guess the point here is that when we take our kid disclosure of whatever that they are disclosing to us, the point here is that we want to find out what it really means. Because what it means is different from what you are seeing. So I may be cross-dressing, you may see me putting on makeup maybe, or wearing a dress, for example. This is what I'm seeing. But what it means could be a totally different thing altogether. It could be because I feel more accepted and feel more belong with a group of people who appreciate me for who I am.
Right.
But does it mean that they actually feel more belong as a female? Or does it mean that they are actually identify more as a female, or they feel more female? May not. Because psychologically, maybe there's a developmental need here. That there's a lack of experience of being belong, or feeling belong, or feeling appreciated here. That's what I'm talking about, the meaning behind it. Right? And it doesn't take their identity away from them. It's just them exploring, and we want to just create an opportunity or space for all that to come up, and have this journey of life, of growing, of developing, right, together, and we can explore together.
Yes, it seems so. I think for the young ones, the teens, it seems so important for them to feel accepted, to feel loved, and to be affirmed in who they are, so to speak. And when they fail to do that, it is they'll be more vulnerable, more susceptible to doing certain things, or identifying certain ways in order to get that affirmation, and in order to feel some sense of self-worth and of being accepted and loved.
Yeah, and it's a developmental need lah. I call it a developmental need, right? And the sense of belonging, the whole process, I call it like the individuation. They're trying to individuate, find who they are, so that they can be confident. So according to Erickson, it's like their fidelity to who they have found out who they are. And sometimes some people take shorter time, some people take longer time. And depending on how much support that they're getting through this growing up stages lah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I've had some patients and some parents who have come to me saying that their children have come up to them and said that they're trans or they're non-binary, and the parents are quite confused as to how to react. So do you like to share with parents how we can react in such situations?
Yeah. So good question, and I think I alluded to that earlier as well. Not just about that, but I guess anything that the child brings up to disclose. We want to identify the expression of it, the behavior. I call it the BMI, the behavior, the meaning, and the identity. Right? So the behavior you're seeing that is actually they're cross-dressing, or the behavior is that they tell you that they are trans. Right? But what's the meaning of it, the M? Right? So there's a lot of meaning underlying all these behaviors, this expression of it, this disclosure, right? We want to find out what does it mean, right? So the younger they are, the more discerning the adult has to be in terms of finding out what the meaning is, right? So a lot of times kids will say, I don't know lah, I think like this, I think like that. Yeah, okay. Let's take it as it is, because they may not have a language for it. They may have gotten some information from, say, social media, or somebody tell them, okay. But the role of the adult, because you are more developed prefrontally, you want to also find out what is the child really saying, right? Anything to do with the, like, say, a sense of self-worth, or the child is saying this because, all their friends are saying this as well. And to say otherwise means that he will be outcast. So there's the in-group peer, out-group pressure kind of thing. Right? What does it mean? If it's not so, if it's more intrinsic, that means it's more like my self-worth. I think if I to connect with this trans label, so to speak, I feel better connected. Then that's journey. You may not have the answer. It's all right. But let's see where else are we going with this. So what else do you want to do, son? Or what else do you want to do, daughter? Girl. What do you like to do now that you know? And thank you for sharing with me. These are the things that you have found out. Would you like to know more information? You would like to go out with your friends who are also trans? What do you want to do? And you accompany them and journey them through their individuating process.
I can imagine it's very tough for parents to do this, in a sense, to accompany the children. This journey is not easy at all. How do you think we can support parents in this area?
I think the first thing is that the parents, the caregiver, should not want to blame yourself first if this was the way in which your child is developing or showing up. Especially in the context of our discussion, or parents who have very staunch values that they uphold, obviously this will be deviating from their values, our Catholic faith, obviously, right? But I experienced that a lot of adults, parents, very quickly blame themselves, right? And I want to share that it's not about them and it's not about what they have done wrong, but I think we need to be aware that it's their journey and it's not our journey. If they ever come to us about this, it means they are starting their journey of something which we do not know. So the moment if we have that view, then we are missing the point. It's not about us, it's actually about them, and they are wondering, they found something. So we want to be with them to, find out. So that would mean that, following from that, would be to find groups or professionals who may offer you certain insights or knowledge about the topic that you may not be familiar with. That's number one. Number two, be among people or be with people who have gone through this, and try to appreciate what they have done and see what aspect of the journey that they have gone through is more applicable to you for your own personal journey. As in my experience, no one family is the same, and the journey also that they go through also not the same. Right? Because the child is so different. So you may take one strategy and work with your own child, right, for another family, but it may not apply to your family, and more so not for your child. Right? So you need to know how to apply all this learning. We just want to pace ourselves. So we want a support group. Right? People have gone through this and who are able to support you in this journey and to be able to know how to be on top of this, because you are still the parent at the end of the day. Right? If you're always in it, it's very hard for you to know what to do and how to support your child. Yeah, so it can be a lot of things that is done. I know resources are quite limited, at least in Singapore.
I think Singapore, at least in the Catholic Church, I believe we have a group called Encourage.
Encourage?
It does support parents in this area and loved ones as well. So I think it is a resource that parents can go to, Encourage Singapore.
Yeah.
And at the same time, well, we are doing this as part of a series on gender theory and gender dysphoria. So you can look at the other resources we have provided in this podcast, and as well as in the show notes and the accompanying resources in our website. So just feel free to check these out. Yeah. Okay. So everyone is different.
Everyone is
different. I think it brings to mind again this same statement which we had mentioned in an earlier podcast, that every child is not the problem, or every individual is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be loved. And I think just for the record, that the statement I just drew on was from Jasone Evert from chastity.com. So
Nice.
that's another good resource that you can turn to, chastity.com. Yeah. Well, before we end, Nicholas, it's been quite an experience, and I'm sure this is not an easy experience for many parents. It is sometimes a long journey, a drawn-out journey, and something which certainly draws on a lot of reserves necessarily for parents. Are there any other tips or advice that you'd like to share with parents on this journey?
In the context of our faith, I think it's very helpful. And I work with many families who actually do that. To enter into a time of prayer to sustain their journey. Like you already pointed out, there's a lot of resource involved in this. Sometimes it may be monetary, sometimes it may be emotional, some psychological, and it's painful, can be very burdensome. Yeah, so I'm just sharing from a point of view that it's more personal, I suppose, is that if you have a spiritual affiliation, I suspect it'll be a lot easier, because you can you have the alternative of saying that I leave the situation I'm going through to a higher being. Not that I want to wash my hand and don't do anything about it. I will still have to do a lot of things about it in my own human way, but I have the opportunity to say that I only can do so much. How about I leave it to you to do the rest? And I'll continue to do my best, everything possible. I feel somebody with a faith can say that, and I think it helps, because sometimes, psychologically speaking, it takes away a certain burden away from your psyche. We call it sometimes your mind space. Yeah,
it's so true. I think for those of us who have our faith in our Lord given to us, and whose strength we can access through the sacraments, through prayer,
right.
through the word. It really makes it so much easier when we know that He is in charge.
Yeah.
We are not, right? Because when we think that we can control everything, well, sooner or later, and more often than not sooner, we'll find out that it's not true, and we are totally flops at this, right? And we have to know that life is such that we need our Lord to be in charge, and that we just, like you said, try our best. Yeah. I remember when I was young, and whenever something went wrong, my mom would say, "Oh, never mind, just trust in God, pray to God, ask Mother Mary, pray for us." Yeah, and whenever something went on right, she would say, "Oh, thank God, thank Mother Mary," And we went along life with this. It made it a lot easier, and we knew who was in charge, and we just had to try our best. Yeah, and I think for parents, do not be discouraged. I remember somebody saying that even the most perfect father had 2 children who fouled up in the Garden of Eden. Right? Yeah, so what more us?
That's
right? But we entrust all our children to our Heavenly Father, who will take care of them the way He knows best. Much, much, much infinitely better than what we can do. And we can do and do our best as Catholic parents. Yes, so thank you very much, Nicholas, for this very enlightening interview, and for sharing your insights and expertise with us. So there we have it. We just heard from Nicholas Gabriel Lim, psychologist, counsellor, and legal practitioner, all rolled into one. In our next episode, we'll be sharing with you another important topic in this area to understand the issue better, and that is disorders of sex development. So till we meet again, take care, and God bless you and the family always. Bye for now.